This feels like it could have been a good writing assignment. Two characters are stuck in a traffic jam all day. What do they talk about? What if they're really religious? What if they're afraid they're going to die tonight? Hi friends, I'm Lane and we are back with another book review. This is California. It's the first of Daughter of Babylon series by Jamie Lee Gray and was published in 2019. It is a post-apocalyptic Christian novel, the plot of which is that terrorists have set fire to California. Katie, her husband, and their young child are trying to escape as millions evacuate. Meanwhile, the US government is attempting to mitigate an impossible situation. While I was reading this book, I kept expecting to see the scene depicted on the cover. A young woman and man dressed in mission gear, bravely walking into a fire. But this is the wrong cover for this book. They should have been in a car, stuck in traffic for the entire book. That is the plot. There were a few good things in this book. It's well written, it's a page turner, there's some exciting drama. I enjoyed the part where the bad guy got what was coming to him. I liked reading a book about a married woman with a young child, even though the child didn't figure into the plot at all. We switched from 3 different perspectives throughout the story, but that was done well too. It wasn't confusing and it always moved the pace along. But there was a lot of bad in this book. I have to break it down into some components. What frustrated me the most? The characters, the politics, the portrayal of the religion that the heroes and I allegedly share. First, the bad Muslims. The book opens with our villain, Nadir, happy that his terrorist plan will happen today. He's praising Allah, and his companion calls Allahu Akbar. He looks forward to the destruction of California, which he calls the Great Satan, and for the punishment of Americans. Now, a dumb liberal like me might think it's unwise to write a story about evil Muslims. There are evil Muslims, no reason to pretend otherwise. But a liberal might be concerned that writing about the bad ones might make it sound like all Muslims are bad. Or they might be concerned that just writing about a different people and a different faith that the author doesn't know very much about could produce a character full of stereotypes, superficial evil, and inhuman motivations. But don't worry, this author rushes in where angels fear to tread. She's not held back by political correctness or politeness. In fact, the evil liberals in this book want to blame right-wing patriots for the terrorism, which is absurd, the author explains, since patriots would never burn down their own home. So back to Nadir, burning down his own home. Yes, he lives in California. In fact, his father is the governor. The governor isn't part of the terrorism plans, and he is furious with his son when he finally finds out what's been going on. I think the message here is that even if you elect a good Muslim to a position of power, their relatives will be bad Muslims who use that power for evil. The book builds to a confrontation between father and son. I was really looking forward to that scene as we keep getting hints that the dad is suspicious. The final conversation is fine. Dad disowns Nadir and calls him out of his mind. I think that scene would have been better written by someone who knew anything about Islam. An argument about the true meaning of jihad would have been educational and also revealed something about the two characters and what sent them in different directions with their faith. But we never get to know Nadir on that level. I'm actually not sure if Governor Dad is a good Muslim or not. In the final scene, he works together with the evil liberals to cover up his son's crimes. Both father and son die in the fires. Nadir's death was well written. He tramples a child without remorse, and then moments later is trampled by the crowd as the flames come for him. His last thoughts are anger toward the godless masses. He was a terrible stereotype, motivated by nonsense, but it felt good to watch him go. I would not personally write a book with an evil Muslim villain. I wouldn't write a book with an evil Jewish villain either. Conservatives do this in real life. Look up the real person / fictional character they've invented of George Soros. But if we're committed to this storyline, I need this character to have better motivation. Let's rewrite it a little. Although Nadir claims he is not a snowflake millennial, the timeline suggests that he is a millennial. So I think his family has lived in the US a long time, even if he was born in Iran. So the story should revolve around him coming of age at 9/11. How did that impact him as a young teen? Was he bullied at school? Did he feel a lot of shame? Maybe his dad was already in politics and was kind of a community leader and was apologizing on behalf of the community. Maybe that made Nadir angry. He wanted to go in the opposite direction of his dad, to be proud of the jihadists rather than feeling sad and guilty. Honestly, a lot of misogynists and white nationalists travel down that same path. The next bad thing in the book was, as I already mentioned, the traffic jam. Katie and her husband are in traffic jams almost the entire book. They have some adventures along the way, but most of it is just a realistic traffic jam. Katie gets rear-ended once. They run out of gas twice. They check their speed a lot. This feels like it could have been a good writing assignment. Two characters are stuck in a traffic jam all day. What do they talk about? What if they're a married couple? What if they're really religious? What if they're afraid they're going to die tonight? But no interesting conversations happen. And I can't overemphasize how angry this makes me, because they take two vehicles. Almost the only conversation they have is by phone or walkie-talkie, and it's all travel plans and gas fears. Now, Katie's husband is a smart man who has figured out a little faster than everyone else in the story that he is in a serious situation. He packs up their important possessions and paperwork and decides to bring both the RV and the truck. But I'm never convinced the truck is necessary. It's not like they packed up all the furniture in their house. All they do is take up twice as much space on the road, use up twice as much gas, and avoid having interesting conversations. I thought the truck would be helpful for off-roading, or maybe the RV would become their new home in the apocalypse. But instead, the story would have been the same if they'd used a minivan. I don't like Katie. I wondered sometime while I was reading if she was supposed to be likable or not. Maybe she'd have a growth in faith moment. She'd go through some sort of repentance and change her life. Again, how great a long car trip conversation could have been. Fear of death could lead to confessing some sort of sin or apathy. Maybe their marriage needed some kind of healing or new life. They could have had great conversations. Katie is a relatable character. She has mom guilt. She gets frustrated in traffic, and she's not sure if her husband is making the right decisions. When she gets rear-ended, she wants to pull over and exchange insurance. And he says, if the truck drives, don't stop. He's correct, of course. No one else seems to realize they're in an apocalyptic disaster book. She and her husband do help other people in need during the disaster, which is great. But even when they're doing it, she's usually quietly resenting it. Katie's main defining trait is annoyance. She is constantly rolling her eyes, grimacing, and thinking sarcastic or judgmental thoughts about everyone around her. She often calls others idiots in her head. Commercials annoy her, other drivers are terrible, Oregonians are jerks, and worst of all, the media. Reporters trying to inform people about a disaster that's still unfolding probably won't do a perfect job, but Katie never gives them a moment of grace. She is sure they are scheming, hiding the truth, or trying to give people bad or useless advice during a crisis. Early in the day, they told people not to evacuate yet. Katie thinks, if things went badly and people died in those fires, the newscasters and officials making these statements would be partially responsible because they'd lulled the public into a false sense of security. Does she think that's the media's goal? Why? Who would benefit from such a thing? Since it's a fictional book, I guess she's right, but I still don't know why the fictional media wants people to be complacent. She's annoyed by the news announcer who won't say terrorism yet. But he doesn't know that yet, even if he might suspect it. Later in the book, when everyone knows that total chaos has overtaken them, There's a report about bombs at the Mexican border. Katie thinks this report is irresponsible too. Why report a bomb if you don't have all the details? What? She yelled at the radio. Are you crazy? But she already knew the answer to that. Yes, they were crazy. Of course they were crazy. Who in their right minds would announce rumors of a possible bomb in America and not explain what kind, how much damage, or anything else? Lunatics, she breathed. You're all lunatics. She's impossible to please. Reporters are bad if they don't say terrorist, but they're also bad if they do say bomb. And yes, everyone gets their news from the radio or the TV through the whole book. It's never said why they don't check their smartphones or social media. A weird thing in this book is that Katie isn't the only one who's always annoyed. In the span of 2 pages, Nadir is listening to the news, yawning and thinking, duh, at the reporters. He also rolls his eyes elsewhere. And actually, the third character I haven't mentioned yet also rolls her eyes when she's talking to people on the phone. Do people really do that in real life?
Oh, brother.
Then we flip back to Katie, who is watching an emergency vehicle slowly make its way through the bad traffic. The driver must be fuming, she assumes. But would he? The EMS team is more used to disasters than average folks. Plus, I think more people just have a wider range of emotions than Katie does.
You humans have so many emotions. You only need 2, anger and confusion.
He might be scared or excited or hopeful. He might be patient and empathetic with all the scared people who are trying to escape. Then Katie sees a woman standing by the side of the road with her broken down car. The woman is glaring at every driver that goes by. Annoyed by the woman's perceived annoyance, Katie thinks, yeah, I didn't put you in that situation. Katie doesn't offer her a ride either. At this point, I don't think she realizes that escaping California is the only hope of survival. But it's odd that her moral goodness isn't represented here. So of course that's my next problem, is how Christianity is represented in this book. Katie does give a ride to a stranger named Jennifer near the end of the book. Jennifer is not deserving of her rescue, though. She mocks Katie's faith. The author doesn't like Jennifer and goes out of the way to make sure that we don't like Jennifer either. I don't find Jennifer's dialogue very realistic. I suppose if your primary interaction with people who disagree with you is online, you might have had someone tell you, God is a figment of your imagination. But it's a weird, rude thing to say in real life, especially to someone who has just rescued you and that you're stuck in the car with. This short section is another lost opportunity for a life-defining conversation. Katie could have explored her own faith and beliefs better by talking with Jennifer, even if they still disagreed in the end. Instead, Katie gives a superior, overly confident invitation to faith. I'm positive if I die tonight, I'll go to heaven. Would you like that confidence too? And being moments away from probable death is a pretty good time for an evangelist. You don't usually get that opportunity. But Katie just comes across as smug. She doesn't confess her own fears or doubts, or even tell a story about God getting her through a hard time. The moment could have been a culmination of a long struggle throughout the whole book. Instead, Jennifer is rude to her again, calling her beliefs garbage. So Katie pats herself on the back for trying, and she pictures God laughing at Jennifer. The picture of God's mocking laughter is really wild to me as a person who believes that God said, "Do I take any pleasure in the death of the wicked? Rather, am I not pleased when they turn from their ways and live?" Jennifer doesn't convert even after they miraculously drive through a wall of fire and escape alive. She thanks them and gets dropped off at a hotel. Having a minor character unchanged by this experience, especially in a Christian novel, is so disappointing. The other Christian parts of the novel include praying a lot, telling us that her husband is a worship pastor, singing praise songs, and one very good reference to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Katie observes that those Bible characters were thrown into a fiery furnace rather than driving their cars through one, but the metaphor for faith stands well. And I think it even lays a groundwork for persecution that our characters are probably going to see later in the series. We find out that they are good people. Their church's beach cleanup project was interrupted by the fire, and they help a Latino family with a broken down car a long time before they meet Jennifer and help her. I don't take issue with any of that. I just wish it wasn't paired with a character who seems to loathe her neighbor, or is at least constantly thinking that they loathe her. A lot of that feels more political than religious. The bad liberals show up with our third narrator, Alana, the Vice President of the United States. She is not a very interesting character, but her view gives us access to what those in power are doing to combat the fires and other terrorism. The back of the book tells us that the liberal government doesn't have what it takes to protect and defend the US, and they only make it worse. The narrative doesn't spell that out quite as clearly. Yes, we see a government in confusion, frustrated and trying out one thing after another. Several of the things they try out are bad, either morally or strategically. But they're given impossible situations, like trying to land airplanes that are being targeted by drones. If the plane doesn't land, it's going to crash because it's out of gas. If it does try to land, the drone will make it crash anyway. What was the president supposed to do? The president is also a woman. Both of these leaders are not white, and they weren't elected to their position. I know the author thinks all of that is bad, but the details are fuzzy. There are some parts where the president acts childish, like she's a little girl who wants to dress up and go out dancing. Other parts, she's too angry, like a man, and she's swearing and demanding that people solve these problems ASAP. The writing suggests that she uses her beauty and charisma to get people to do whatever she wants. Now, I don't know what to do about a terrorism crisis or a fire crisis. It seems like she tried to collect info and to make tough decisions. There were two very bad acts. She bribed the Mexican president to open the border, and she set planes to evacuate the politicians of California while ignoring common people. I don't really see these as liberal actions. I think they're just supposed to add to a picture of her as being bad. Although the theme of not caring about common people came up again when she made a snide comment about Walmart shoppers. So maybe she hates poor people. Again, I'm not sure why it's related. The real sin to the author is at the end of the story, when the government finds this was all caused by villainous Muslims. It's time for a cover-up. Why? They never say. They don't even imply why. Liberals just hate the truth, I guess? I've never met a liberal who believed like these characters do. So after the longest, hardest day ever, the exhausted vice president gets a second wind. She gets to be in charge of brainstorming the cover-up. What fun! She relishes the extra work. She joyfully starts to plan. And here's the worst section in the entire book. The governor had shared some ideas, but Alana had her own as well. Her favorite was a vast right-wing conspiracy. There were gun-toting NRA kooks, Christian fundamentalists, political outliers, veterans. Ooh, that might be best. Militia organizations. Yeah, this would be fun. Pretty much, she could pick any group she hated and place the blame on them, as long as she could conjure up enough evidence pointing in their direction. And that was so easy to do. Did you know that liberals hate veterans? I suppose that's why their health care is so bad. What's wild is that Alana hates all of these groups for no reason, because she knows that anytime they're accused of doing something bad, it was probably faked. Anyway, now Alana can sleep in peace, knowing that she took a disaster and made it into a useful political attack. The liberals have also committed an unforgivable sin, not supporting Israel. Israel comes up twice in this book, and it feels very shoved into the plot. It only makes sense if you already believe that God cares more about the military might of the modern secular state of Israel than anything else. The ambassador to Israel calls the president during the climax to let her know this is why all of this is happening. It's too late to fix it now, but he's just letting her know. He also met with the ladies before the crisis began, trying to warn them to get their priorities in order. Israel is the only priority. The word choice around Israel is also very odd. Alana calls them troublesome and irksome. She says all the nations of the world despise Israel. Huh? Let's be clear, Israel is a powerhouse with massive support. I don't find them irritating. I find their government genocidal. I want that government to be kind to their neighbors. But Katie would probably tell me that I support Muslim terrorists. So I guess that relates to the book's theme after all. That brings us to the end. It's the beginning of the series, which I won't be continuing. The end of the world is at hand, starting with California. As Nadir says, California is one of the worst offenders. It's the one that floods the world with American filth. The wicked movies, the naked women, promiscuity, homosexuality, drunkenness. I call this a right-wing book in the title, but that's a bit of an assumption on my part. The hero characters don't really spell out their beliefs. It's just a whole book of being told, those terrible liberals hate us, those terrible Muslims hate us, those terrible non-believers hate us. But when the villain gives his final rant, I can't tell if they disagree with him or not. I think they hate the same people, and this is going to be a story about God punishing those people. Even though the jihadists set the fires, they were tools of the Christian God. And God was angry that America withheld a fraction of our military might from supporting God's favorite country. Apparently, as I just found out, the expression daughter of Babylon is a reference to America. And it's supposed to be an insult on the level of questioning one's parentage. So while Nadir is calling us the Great Satan, the heroes also have an offensive title for the country that they claim to love. And when I read books like this, it makes me think they are cheering for the end of the world as well. Thanks so much for listening. I'm reviewing fiction books about religious deconstruction, Christian romance, and Christian apocalypse stories. I am tying all these together in my own fiction writing while looking at some good and bad examples. Leave me a comment if there is a book that you think I should review, especially if the subject of doubt comes up. This seems to be kind of a niche subject that isn't really its own genre yet, so I'm trying to figure it out. Bye.